So hi everyone, my name is Ritika and welcome back to another episode of Redefined. Today we have the pleasure of being joined by Meena Wasim. And before anything, I'm just going to let her introduce herself.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm not joining you from sunny San Francisco. I am in snowy, cold, and windy Kingston, Ontario. I go to Queen's University. I'm a third-year student here right now. I'm originally from Kitchener, Ontario, so shout out to that region. And I'm studying in the commerce program here at Queen's. My focus in the commerce program so far has been mainly in areas regarding employee well-being, regarding work staff, board staff relationships, and as well as anti-oppression principles in the workplace. I do have a variety of backgrounds in areas such as nonprofit work and in political advocacy, but we'll get more into that as the presentation progresses. And I'm super excited that Ritika invited me. I was flattered when I got her email. I was like, "Girl, me? Are you sure?" So this is super exciting, and I'm really thankful to be able to share this space with all of you.
Yeah, no, definitely. And oh my God, you're just too humbled. You have done so much. And I think that's what I would love to start my questions by, like, all the recognition that you have received and, whether it being a part of the Kitchener City Council or, being able to land the $100,000 scholarship or like, being able to stand up for like women, like in the area of sexual assault, like how were you able to do all of this?
Okay, so great question. For context, I'm studying at Queen's University as a Loren scholar. And for those of you who are in high school and are looking out for scholarships, keep an eye out. The Loren Scholarship is a $100,000 scholarship to fund your post-secondary studies. And in regards to my work with sexual violence, I'm one of the board members on the Sexual Assault Center in Kingston. And being a part of these opportunities or being part of these spaces has really just been about two things. First, from I think when I was in high school, I realized very early on that my identity as a Muslim woman, and especially as someone who wore the hijab, oftentimes meant that people underestimated me. This wasn't always a bad thing because you always have the element of surprise when someone's like, "Huh, I didn't think you were that cool, but I guess you are." But the downside is that if you're standing in a room of like 50 people, or you're in a classroom, or somebody walks in and they're looking to take on somebody as a mentee, let's say, I found that oftentimes in my community, I was skipped over. And as unfortunate as it is, the only way to build credibility in my community to be able to access and enter certain spaces and advocate for people like me, for people who come from immigrant backgrounds, was by joining organizations that gave me some kind of like title or gave me some type of access to some kind of legibility. So for instance, with Loren, I'm super grateful to have access to that financial opportunity, but I found that oftentimes the title of Loren Scholar was just a way to enter. It was a way to get my foot in the door. And it allowed me to enter certain meetings and boardrooms and spaces where people who look like me or people who come from financial backgrounds that I do would not have been able to enter before. And you might be thinking to yourself, like, "Girl, that kind of feels like a sellout move, but why would you do that?" But the thing is, once you're in those spaces and you have the capacity, you have the skill or the ability or the passion to advocate for your communities, you're literally opening more doors as you go. So not every room that I entered was always the most accepting or the most ready to hear what I had to say, but it did give them something to think about. And whatever you can do to move the dial in whatever spaces you're in, whatever communities you're in, always adds up. Whether it's you as one person, or whether it's you with your friends, or whether it's you making an isolated effort in one community and somebody else similar in age is doing something in like Manitoba. Super important that you're doing that work and you're constantly progressing and moving the dial forward, because all of it does add up. I revisit a lot of the spaces, like the organizations, the nonprofits, the schools that I used to be a part of, and I'm seeing such significant changes in the treatment of students, the treatment of volunteers, the treatment of staff. And that is just a testament to the accumulation of so many people's efforts who enter these spaces and make that effort to be heard. So that's when it comes to why so much, like how did that come to be, how did so many opportunities come to my plate, it was really about thinking, okay, what can I do to elevate my communities? But we'll talk more as the conversation goes on about, there's a double-edged sword that sometimes comes with this stuff, but we'll talk more about it.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that sounds good. And I think I 100% resonate with what you just said, because even I've realized in my own experiences, whether it be individually or whether it be starting a nonprofit, I've realized having certain titles on your resume or on your nonprofit's profile really help you get further opportunities. Like, whether it be winning certain awards like the Diana Award, or whether it be getting certain consulting awards, and, even getting into certain companies per se, like, Deloitte, BCG, Bain, like everyone's striving for those companies, and there's a reason why, because with those company titles and names comes those opportunities, which
Mm-hmm.
is, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is something that does exist. And I think the only point, the main thing is that being able to use that privilege, or rather that title, you're able to get for good. And
Mm-hmm.
I would
Yeah.
really like to hint towards one of the points that you mentioned, like, how whatever spaces you enter, some of those spaces may not be as accepting or as inclusive of who you are as a person, or rather the way you dress up, or, the way you speak. So
Mm-hmm.
from just building off that, I'm wondering, like, like, in all of your experiences, is there any one example that you would like to share with us where, you have felt defined by, like, your race, your religion, your nationality, your color by someone else? And if so, then how did you kind of handle that situation?
That's a great question. This actually comes up. This actually comes up a lot. And oftentimes it comes up in spaces where people don't already know kind of like the things I stand for, the work that I do in my communities. And one of the most distinct experiences, I think, was in first year of university. So, for context, when I entered the Queen's Commerce program, I was the only hijabi woman at the time in the program. And when I looked at the alumni wall, it seemed like I was the only one in the program up until that point. So it was an interesting experience because I remember doing a group project, and there was, um, when business students, like, we're always checking out people's LinkedIn's, I guess. And some of my group members were looking at each other's LinkedIn's, and then one of the group members came across mine and said, "Oh, Meena, like, you're a Loren scholar." And what I noticed was that there was a group member who, is lovely and awesome, and we're still friends to this day. But prior to knowing that I was a Loran scholar, I remember in our group meetings would oftentimes ignore whatever I had to say, would shut down ideas, would kind of just take the charge and think that nobody else had anything to contribute. And then after learning that I was a Loran scholar, they suddenly, like, messaged and said, like, hey, let's, like, get a coffee sometime, like, and they would initiate a lot more touch points like that. And I thought that there were so many instances that happen like that, where when I enter a space, nobody really cares until they think, oh, you have something to bring to that table. And that's probably the most distinct experience that I'm comfortable sharing, because I do want to respect the privacy and capacity of people to learn and grow from those experiences. But one thing that's taught me is, first, you have to, in some ways, anticipate that that's going to happen, and you have to really set your expectations appropriately. As sad as it is, a lot of times women of color, when we enter these types of spaces where people haven't really interacted with those who look like us or those who come from our religious backgrounds, we can get dismissed. But if you're ready for that and you expect that that might happen, and you don't let that affect you, or you at least don't let that get you down enough to stop what you're doing, you're going to be fine. And I think in my Queens community in particular, in my first year, what I did was I took very close notes. I mean, literally, like, notes in my diary, like my journal, of all these experiences that were stacking up, like these little microaggressions that were adding up. And I documented them, because documentation is really important for you to know what could be better. The thing is, we always talk about, like, problem solvers, and we really look at people like Elon Musk as if they're solving, the biggest problems in the world. um, but in reality, you yourself, when you're having these experiences, you can think about this as a problem to solve, And not that I'm glorifying all of that additional labor in any way, but I'm saying if you're documenting, you're literally taking note of all the things that could be better. And so whenever I introduce myself to people, I like to say, I'm somebody who likes to leave spaces better than I left them. And that couldn't be more true in the case of, for instance, my program at Queen's, where I found in my second year, there was a huge initiative to make policy changes in our student government and in our school's official policies around equity and inclusion work. So I think that kind of stuff really, if you're ready for it and you really document it along the way and you think, how could I improve this, will help to drive a lot of positive changes in the spaces that you occupy.
Yeah, no, definitely. And oh my God, everything you say is just so true and like gold coming out of your mouth. The reason
I'm
I
sure you've
say
had
this,
those experiences too. I'm sure it's not just me. And I'm sure that the people who are listening to this, if they
yeah,
are interested in hearing what you have to say, Ritika, I'm sure that they also resonate with these types of experiences. And, for instance, we have lots of international students in our program who often say like people underestimate them because of an accent or because of limited, like English skills, when in reality they might have some of the most incredible experiences and like skills to share with the people around them. So it's unfortunate, but if you prepare yourself,
yeah.
it lessens the blow a little bit.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I was just going to speak to that as well, because a lot of my mentees also, like, who are from non-traditional backgrounds, I think we also really resonate on this front, because just because, let's say you come from a certain background, like I come from kinesiology, and like I remember like hopping into a few coffee chats or like doing a few case competitions, which are very businessy. You often notice how until people know some of your achievements, just off the bat, just knowing that, okay, first, you're a woman, first, second, you're an international student, third, you are from a non-traditional background, and just knowing those three factors, they tend to place a lot of judgment on what your capabilities are or what you can actually bring to the table. And oftentimes that's undervalued, like it's often seen negatively, that that
Yeah.
you do not have much to offer. And as you said, similarly, like often the perspective is not taken into account, or maybe many a times people like always speak, like in the sense that when you're speaking they'll cut you out and continue their conversations. But I feel like once, that's when even I realized that having those certain titles are important to kind of give you credibility.
Mhm.
um, and obviously, as we mentioned before also, it may not be the best thing, that you need credibility from external sources to actually show who you are and how worthy you are. But
Yeah.
since it is what it is, I think it's just about, as you said, like playing it well. Make sure to work hard to get certain of those external credibilities, and once you have those, use it
Mhm.
to your advantage to advance your community.
Yeah.
People from belonging to your similar backgrounds, like whether it be non-traditional students, whether it be international students overall. And their
Yeah.
accent is a big issue. When I first came to Canada, I know someone in my LC group, like leadership camp group, asked me this question. They're like, "Oh, you're from India, do you know how to speak English?" I was like, "Well, Britishers took over India, so I guess I do." So I feel like
Oh
some of
gosh.
those conversations.
If only that person knew that English is taught in like almost every school in all of South
Exactly.
Asia, pretty much in the Middle East, like almost everywhere. I mean,
Exactly.
like
Even in
if
Pakistan,
only.
a lot of my friends, like
Yep.
people, I don't know why they have certain perceptions based on certain images they see of the media in terms of how these areas might even look. Like, and it's just funny that people think that way, because I'm like, no, everyone's very educated, and like we know how to navigate ourselves in a way. So I feel like that is really interesting. And I think I loved when you spoke about documenting your microaggressions, because that is something I do as well. Oftentimes I think when it comes to like LinkedIn, the reason I'm relating it, it'll become more clear. But like on LinkedIn, a lot of people think every relation is very transactional, and like when people post, it's just to like glorify themselves. But for me, like LinkedIn has become that medium of documenting my microaggressions, whether it be sharing my failure stories, or whether it be sharing certain, I don't know, the way I feel towards certain people, the way I feel towards my race or my nationality overall, just sharing those, because I know there are many people who resonate with those microaggressions, and just
Mhm.
kind of letting the audience know about it makes them resonate with you and kind of feel a sense of security, empathy, and feel loved and belonged, because they know that other people feel the same. And there's no harm in experience having those experiences. It's only about standing up and like being strong and like smart in the way you play around those experiences.